Okay, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. The webinar will begin in approximately 10 minutes. Until then, you will see everything that you'll need to join us for the webinar and hear us speak. Thank you. Okay, if you're just joining us, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. The webinar will begin in about 5 minutes. Until then, we'll be posting the information that you'll need to hear us speak and view the webinar. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is James Damon, and I'm a Program Development Specialist with RITAC, and I'm going to explain how to use the webinar system today. And here in just a moment, here now you'll have a control panel that looks like this on the right of your screen, except the phone number will be different and the information may be a little different as well. And our webinar system allows you to listen to us using your computer or your telephone. So you can select which method you'd like to use using the audio tab on your control panel. And if you select use telephone, it will give you a number to dial. And we are expecting close to 400 attendees for today's webinar, so we'll be keeping all lines muted throughout the webinar. So you will not need to enter an audio pin if you're going to use the telephone option. And you can also listen today through your computer speakers by selecting the Use Mic and Speakers option. And even though your line will be muted, there are a couple ways that we will allow you to interact with us today. We'll be stopping after each presenter to take questions. So please use the questions section to send us any question that you have, and we just ask that you identify which presenter you're asking the question for. And also, you can use the question feature to let us know that you're having technical problems. And another way to let us know that you're having technical problems is to use the Raise My Hand feature that's has a hand with a green arrow in front of it. So I'll ask you to go ahead and push that so I can make sure everyone can hear me. And it looks like see several hands going up, so that's good. And so at this time, I'm going to turn the webinar over to Lisa.
Thanks, James. This is Cynthia Peterson. I am the Out-of-Home Care and Youth Program Manager for the Child Welfare Information Gateway and Project Coordinator for the NRC for In-Home Services. On behalf of the NRC for In-Home Services, welcome to Part 3 of a 3-part series on pregnant and parenting teens. Today's discussion will focus on 2 innovative programs that are specifically designed to address the unique needs of teen fathers. We will also have a segment where we will outline the legal issues as it pertains to pregnant and parenting teens who are in or exiting substitute care. I will go ahead and turn the webinar over to Lisa, who will talk a little bit more about the National Resource Center for In-Home Services and RATAC, the Runaway and Homeless Youth Technical Assistance Center.
Thanks, Cynthia. Along with Cynthia and James, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. The National Resource Center for In-Home Services is a fairly new service of the Children's Bureau, and we are co-hosting this webinar along with the Runaway and Homeless Youth Technical Assistance Center. In addition, we have 3 co-sponsors, the Friends National Resource Center for Community-Based Child Abuse Prevention, the National Resource Center for Youth Development, and joining us for the 3rd in the series, the National Child Welfare Resource Center on Legal and Judicial Issues. And so I'd like to welcome members of the ABA Parents Attorneys listserv who registered for this webinar as well. Glad to have you all with us. As Cynthia mentioned, this is a 3rd in a series of webinars, all focusing on the needs and services for pregnant and parenting youth who have either been in foster care, exiting foster care, or in a runaway or homeless shelter. If you weren't able to join us for either of the first 2 webinars, which focused on policies and programs, you can find an archived recording and PowerPoint handouts for those webinars on the National Resource Center for In-Home Services website, and we'll have a site for that in your PowerPoint later. Today's webinar is specifically focusing on issues around teen fathers and legal issues. And we're really honored to have a great cast of presenters today. We'll be introducing them specifically in a few minutes, but we have presenters from the Community Action Partnership of Western Nebraska. They represent the maternity group home and transitional living programs. We have both the Inspector General and 2 staff from the Office of the Inspector General of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. They work in specifically in the child welfare area. And then we also have Scott Trowbridge from the NRC for Legal and Judicial Issues. Just to share the objectives for our presentation, we're going to continue our effort to share information about innovative programs that serve the needs of teens, but especially focusing on teen fathers. Discuss legal issues surrounding pregnant and parenting teens, both male and female, and provide you with some helpful resources to support your work with pregnant and parenting youth. Just to frame the issue a little bit, I think we know that teen parenting poses significant developmental challenges for youth, and even more so for youth who are either homeless or are in foster care or have recently transitioned from care. There's sometimes some confusion in a state about whose kids are these really. If the young parent is a foster care ward, who's responsible for serving that new family? And these sorts of issues we're coming together from different points of view to talk about how we need to work together. Because these young people and their children deserve prevention services to strengthen the new family. They deserve child welfare and educational services to support healthy development of the young parent. They certainly deserve and need transition services. If there is child maltreatment, they have the right to the same sorts of in-home services that families would get if the parents weren't in care. And if children have been removed, certainly they deserve services to reunify kids in care. So all of these issues are important, and we got to work together. Next slide. The reason that we've decided to focus on fathers in this third webinar is that fathers are important to children. The research has shown again and again that children with involved fathers have better developmental and educational outcomes. Young fathers, whether or not they live with a child's mother, have the potential to be great resources for their children. And the rights of teen fathers deserve the same protection as the rights of all fathers and the rights of mothers. And that's why we're giving this focus today. We're also really excited because there's some great things happening around the country with fathers and that we wanted to share with you today. And so now I'm going to turn the presentation over to T.C. Cassidy from the Runaway and Homeless Youth Technical Assistance Center, who will talk a little bit about the maternity group home and transitional living programs that they support.
Thanks, Lisa. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today and thank you for your participation. And I will just go over briefly, I've provided some links to the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act legislation, which gives legislative authority for Family and Youth Services Bureau to provide programs for youth 16 to 22 through transitional living and or maternity group homes, so that would include pregnant and parenting youth. The FSBE started funding these programs as far as transitional living programs in 1990, and as of 2009, they funded 208 transitional living programs and an additional 38 maternity group homes under this authority, with a total of nearly $40 million across the country going to these programs. And joining us today is Vicki Lawton, who is the Director of Youth Services, Youth Programs for the Community Action Partnership of Western Nebraska. And CAP1 provides a full continuum of services to runaway and homeless youth. And today, Vicki's going to be speaking specifically to you about the services CAP1 provides through their transitional living program and maternity group homes that serve young fathers as well as expectant fathers. And Vicki, I appreciate your time today. And at this point, I will turn it back over to you and let you talk about your program there in Nebraska.
Okay, thank you. We have both transitional living program and maternity group home TLP that are both funded by FSBE, and we run these as cluster site programs side by side. We do have young fathers in our programs, and they may be custodial fathers, they may be non-custodial. Sometimes the mothers are also involved, and so we have been working really hard to provide for young fathers the success that they need to be that influence in their children's lives. The first slide shows kind of what we're mandated to do. We don't have any real choice in this. This is what the legislation says. And so our age range is 16 to 22. They are eligible until their 22nd birthday. Their length of stay, the maximum length of stay in our program is 21 months. The national average for a young father is 6 months. The average length of stay in our program is about 12 months. We have noticed that young fathers who are with the mothers of their children tend to stay longer than the 12 months even. Non-systems youth means that these are youth that are not currently a part of any welfare or juvenile justice system. They have no stable, safe place to stay at night. So these are what the youth that are currently referred to as homeless youth. The services that are most requested by our young fathers, and this is kind of interesting because it's different than our young mothers. The two that they really focus on right away are a safe, stable place to live. Some of these fathers do not currently have custody of their children, and so they are, that's a real focus that they bring with them to the program. And then just across the board, they want employment. They want it now, and they need as much money as possible. And the thing that's different about young fathers and young mothers is that the young fathers will tend to take whatever job they can just to get money rolling in, and it might be something that they really don't want to do, like a kill floor on a packing plant or factories or a road crew, construction crew. But if it gets money coming in, then that's where they go. Differences that we've really experienced, that's one of them. And I kind of summed it up in short-term and long-term. The females in our program, they are focused more on the long-term goals. Let's get our education done. Let's work on our skill building. Let's learn how to cook. Let's get that degree that's going to help us in the long run. Whereas fathers are more short-term. I need a place to stay tonight that my kids can stay with me. And I need money coming in because I've got some expenses to take care of these kids. And so that's kind of a little different. In education, because the fathers are so focused on employment, they push education, skill building, some of those things to the side. And so we've had to be creative in how we can still bring these about in our youth lives because we still are mandated to do this. And so one of the things that we've done in education is we have all of our transitional living staff are trained GED instructors, and so that they can, and so we can do the GED instruction on their time, on the youth's time, not on a class time. And that has really helped some of our young fathers to pick up that piece and get their GED when in normal circumstances where their choice is to miss work and go to a class or they just wouldn't do it. The skill building, all of our youth do the Daniel Memorial Assessment, and their case plan is set up on that. And once again, our fathers really struggle with attending auxiliary classes when their focus is, I got to get money. And so what we've done is, and our youth are the ones that are doing a lot of this, they're designing classes online where our fathers can come in and just sit down, go through modules, do the pieces that can be done online on their time. So they don't have to go and just sit in a class. We call our counseling coaching because, once again, our young fathers, they are not that open to counseling, but they are open to coaching. And we have more success with that. Parenting, we do require all of our young fathers to participate in a parenting plan and in parenting classes. The parenting plan, it may mean meeting with our mediator and actually working out a plan with the mother of the child or children to where they're getting the best of both parents in that situation, the children are. Barriers to young fathers. One that surprised us as we've been going through this is there is a stereotype. If a young mother walks into, let's say, a WIC office or an office to receive assistance, and they have a child, the assumption is that they are the custodial parent of that child. If a young father walks in to an office with a child, they have to prove that they're the custodial parent of that child. And so there's a difference there in the way our young fathers are treated when they go in to ask for assistance. The other difference that we found is our young men tend to lack some of the documentation. Our young females will usually know where their child's birth certificate is, where their Social Security card is, and some of that documentation. Our young fathers, a lot of times, they won't know where that documentation is, and they won't know where to go get it. And so one of the things we end up doing with a lot of our young fathers is helping them to bring that documentation together and understand the importance of having a safe place to keep that documentation. Services. These are some of the services that our young fathers tend to tap into. Some of these we provide in-house. Some of them are referrals, and some of them are provided through collaboration. I don't know how many of you are part of a rural area, but in our rural area we cannot afford to duplicate services, and so it's our very survival to collaborate and refer. And so the items listed up there may be in-house, but they may also be collaborations or referrals. I think James now is going to let us know how to do questions if you have any.
Yes, and there are two ways that you can ask questions. I just sent everyone a message. All you have to do is just respond to it, and I will get the question. And you could also use the question feature and enter your question that way. And our first question is, can you comment about the importance or need for screening and intervention and services for teen substance abuse and risk for prenatal exposure and co-occurring disorders?
We do. Every one of our youth that comes into our program, we have agreements with mental health and substance abuse counselors in town, and our youth get a substance abuse evaluation and a mental health evaluation. We also are in-house, a part of our umbrella program, Community Action. We have a federally qualified health center, and they assist us in those screenings and in the planning for how we're going to handle that.
Excellent.
Another thing I might say, we don't do zero tolerance. We do harm reduction. And so when we have a youth, a pregnant youth or a parenting youth that is struggling with substance or, coexisting disorders, we will do everything we can to keep them in the program and to work with them through those issues.
Great. The next question is a two-part question. Where do you get your mediators from, and how are they trained?
Our mediators, we have a mediation center here in town, and they go through a week-long, it's a pretty intensive training, and I just make sure that we have 2 staff members that are at all times trained for that, and then those are the people that handle our mediation. If it's a situation where we feel like it would be better to have someone else handle it, then we have an MOU with our mediation center, and they will actually do the mediation.
Okay, excellent. Another question is, what types of child care do fathers typically ask for? Is it daytime, weekend, alternative hours, etc.?
Typically, it is daytime because our dads are going to, the work they want to do is those construction jobs, the road crews, usually it's those jobs that are taking place during the day, even though they're very long hours. One place where our dads really struggle with is when their child is sick or something like that. We don't have any sick baby facilities here in our area, and so one of our challenges is setting up either what happens if you're not done on the road crew and your daycare is done. or what happens when your child is sick. So that's where we spend a lot of our focus.
Okay. Another question is, do you have any gang issues in the area that you're providing services?
They would not be anywhere near what I imagine you guys have, that you have in the urban areas. We do have gang issues. They come up from Denver, and we do have things going on. A couple years ago, we had a couple of our TLP youth involved in a drive-by, and so those things are just really hard no matter where you're at, and you've got to, you know, we are in constant contact with our law enforcement, and they give us a lot of assistance in how to handle that. But we do not ever choose one gang over the other.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. How are the rights and responsibilities being communicated to teen parents that are currently incarcerated or in rehab services?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I think they're asking how are termination of parental rights being avoided, and
yeah.
I can ask for clarification on this question as well.
But that's it. I mean, when a youth comes into the program, we have their case plan, and so all along throughout the whole process, we're having team meetings, we're having family meetings, we're working with the guardian ad litems or the case managers, CPS workers, and so if a father does everything he can and still the rights may be terminated because he just can't, I mean, it's just not going to be good, then we're still there for the father, and we still act as an advocate for the father in helping the father come to terms with it, helping the father grieve, and helping them then come up with their next steps. Does that answer your question?
I'll check with them and see and let
Okay.
you know. And if you are asking a question and we're not able to get to it since we just have an hour today, I will be sending all the questions that weren't answered to presenters, and we'll have that on the website.
Thank you. This is Lisa again. Thanks so much, Vicki, for sharing information about your program. You see Vicki's contact information. One of the really great things about this program is the amount of partnership in the community, and you mentioned the memorandums of understanding, and those are all things that if you have more information, you can, if you want more information, you can contact either RITAC or directly to Vicki. I have the privilege now of introducing our panelists from the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services Inspector General. They're going to talk about their risk reduction training for pregnant and parenting wards. Our first speaker will be Dr. Denise Kane, who is the Illinois Inspector General. She was appointed by the Governor of Illinois as the first Inspector General in 1993. The Inspector General's office was created to reform and strengthen the child welfare system and is responsible for investigating child deaths as well as allegations of misconduct throughout the system. The investigations by the Inspector General yield both case-specific recommendations and recommendations for larger changes within the child welfare system. The Inspector General's office also undertakes evidence-based projects designed to improve practice, management, and policy, and increase professionalism in the department. Along with Denise are James Parker and Mary Kay McDermott, who are staff for the Project Initiatives Department of the Illinois Department of Inspector General. And they're going to, they've been working on this training, and they're going to share that. So first, welcome, Denise.
Hi, I'm Denise Kane. I'm Inspector General of DCFS, and that's the Illinois Child Welfare Agency. I think Lisa explained one of the mandates that my office has is that what we do is look at the deaths of any children who the child or the family was involved with the Department of Children and Family Services, either publicly or privately through agencies, within 12 months prior to the child's death. So we began gathering data 10 years ago, and we began to release 10-year data on populations of children who the department was involved with. And this is the subpopulation of children of wards of the department. So it would be either the parent was a ward at the time of the child's death or within a year of being emancipated from the department. So this is data that was gathered between FY 2000 to FY 2010. We had about 544 children of wards each year during this period of time. The population of wards were between, I'd say, 600 to 580 wards in a given year. So this database shows a database of 50 children of wards who died during this 10-year period. And if you look at it, it's the same similar breakdown that we see across other populations of DCFS, and that the majority of deaths were either accidental or natural. The accidental deaths were the improper sleep placement, or we had some children, they had other accidental deaths, but the majority of the accidental deaths were sleep-related. But if you look at the sudden infant death syndromes, which were natural, and we had 6 cases of kids, children of wards dying of SIDS, you could put them in the accidental category if it could be prevented by way of the Back to Sleep campaign. So if you add those two numbers together, then we're close to 40% of the population where we could do preventive work with the parents on perhaps lowering infant mortality. The population that probably is most concerning is the homicide, and that is where children die at the hands of their parents. I'm going to focus in on the dads, because what we had out of the 10 homicides by parents, 40% were at the father or the ward father or the boyfriend, the father of the baby that was living with the ward. When we dug deeply into this data, because it's pretty horrifying when you understand homicide, what we found out was the fathers, generally it was infants under 6 months. Some of these dads were good dads. Most of the deaths, when they described what happened, and this is because most of them went to trial, and the information was gathered either from their public defender or in plea bargains in the criminal system. But several of the father's statements were concerning because it showed either a lack of knowledge or lack of skills, and that the triggering event was the child's crying. One father put alcohol in the child's bottle because he didn't know how else to stop the chronic crying. Most of these babies were about 4 months of age, so that goes right into the key colic period for young infants. When we looked at this, we realized that maybe you could do prevention work with homicide, especially when you're working with young fathers that may not have experience or the skills in working with young children. And I just thought about what the people from Nebraska said, and I think we should add this, and thank you for bringing this up, and that is, how do dads take care of sick children? Though none of these cases involved a child that was ill, it's certainly something that we should pay attention to, because if you don't have experience taking care of children, you may not know what to do if a child has a temperature or seems to be inconsolable. You can't console the child. So that's our data review. Part of our mandate is we should do something about it. And we try to do error reduction training or give feedback to the field to say, okay, let's work on this so we can lower infant mortality. And I'll hand it over to James now, and he'll talk about the project.
Thank you. Thanks, Denise. As a result of the 10-year data and the 10-year report, the risk reduction training was developed. Initially, the training was developed for parenting teen moms and dads. Our first trainings involved both of them. One of the things that we did find was that the training was not as successful as we would like it, and we owe that to the fact that the parents were not necessarily co-parenting a child. So they kind of was an opportunity for them to meet one another, and it really became more of a kind of a social interaction than actually a learning experience or an interactive experience with the parents. So what we've actually done is we've developed 2 trainings, and that's kind of what this slide looks at. We've developed training for dads, and we've also developed training for moms. there is also a component of the training for caseworkers that allows them to replicate the training on an ongoing basis, because so often children, these kids age out of the system and new kids come in, and we really like the newer children who come in to have the benefit of this training. One of the things that we really want to stress in the training is that we are trying to reduce infant mortality. In addition to that, we really want to make parents aware and help them recognize the stress and the anger that can be provoked by an inconsolably crying child. Additionally, we want to make sure that we impress upon them the importance of safe sleep practices and identifying caregivers who have the temperaments and skills to effectively care for an infant. What we're going to present is just a real snapshot of the training. So we're going to run through it rather quickly, and as I said, it's just going to be a snapshot. If anyone is interested in getting more information about the training, our contact information is at the end, and we'll be more than willing to send you our how-to guide so that you can actually replicate the training. The slide that you're seeing now is pretty much how we begin our training, and it's really kind of an icebreaker, and it's an opportunity for us to assess and for our young parents to begin to discuss with one another what they consider to be safe and unsafe sleep practices. And what this involves is we basically put together a number of photographs, and we kind of put them on a table, and what our young people do is they will grab a picture, and they will put it either on a safe or an unsafe board. And after they've done that, what we ask them to do is explain why the situation is safe, why it isn't safe, and it's really a good icebreaker, and it's a real opportunity for them to share with one another what they consider to be safe sleep practices. And often, we find that they really have a fairly good understanding of what is safe and what is unsafe. In addition to this, there is also kind of a crib exercise, and with that crib exercise, we ask them to set up a crib and to demonstrate what would be safe and what would not be safe. In addition to just being able to assess their understanding of safe and unsafe sleep practices and for them to share their knowledge between each other, it's also an opportunity for them to get to know one another and to really begin to bond in this process. The other really important part of this training, and the thing that we find is probably has the most impact, are the risk reduction training materials that we use. And what we've done is we've basically developed 2 sets of training vignettes. And the training vignettes, as is indicated on the slide, are really based on some of the investigations that we've undertaken in our office. And we really see them as learning activities. And in each one of these training risk reduction books, there are roughly 5 scenarios. And we are looking at cases that are discussion-oriented. They're generally easy to read, because one of the things we were really kind of curious about is we were actually prepared to read these. But we always say, would anyone like to read them? And we've always been pleasantly surprised that a lot of our young parents are clamoring an opportunity to read and are quite competent readers. So, that is also something that we found that we are really, really pleased about. The characters are all really kind of relatable, and there are prompting questions at the end of each of these scenarios. And just to give you an example, one of the scenarios in the book has to do with Felicia. She's 16 years old. She has a 6-month-old. The child's name is Tyler. She's had a number of placements, and as a result of those placements, she ends up living with an older sister. She has a crib. She uses the crib because one of the things we've also found is that very often our young people have appropriate sleeping arrangements for their children, but will still kind of co-sleep with their a bed share with their child. So she actually has that. She also has a portable crib, so in the event that she needs some alternative sleeping kind of arrangements, she also has those. And So she and her sister get into it over the weekend, and she decides that she's going to just kind of pack up, she and Tyler, and she ends up going to a friend's house, and the sleeping accommodations at the friend's house is only a mattress in a room. And what Felicia does is she has some awareness of what is a safe sleep practice. She pushes the mattress up against the wall, and she decides that so that she won't roll over on Tyler, that she will kind of hug the edge of the bed. And so we have our young people read this scenario, and some of the questions that we asked in terms of prompting questions, what is the potential danger of having Tyler sleep on a mattress that's been pushed up against the wall? Or we might say, for example, in general, what is the danger if a child's sleeping on an adult bed? And it really generates a lot of discussion, and sometimes I think an awful lot of judgment. But it really is very productive in terms of having young people begin to understand that they really need to be proactive in their thinking, that parenting really kind of involves stepping back, taking a moment, and really kind of assessing what one might do in that kind of a situation. One of the questions that we often get from our young parents is this fiction or is this fact? And we will, when we are asked, we will often tell them, we do tell them that this is in fact a fact, because in this situation, what actually happened was that so often infants and very, very young children do things when we least expect it. And what happened was that Felicia was sleeping on the side of the bed that she managed to hug effectively, but during the night, the mattress moved away from the wall, and little did she know that Tyler could roll over. And that's what happens sometimes. The children sometimes will develop new skills, and we simply are not aware of it. And Tyler rolled over and was trapped between the wall and the mattress and suffocated. So, I mean, this is just kind of an example of one of our safe sleep scenarios. There are 4 other ones that we use, and we get a lot of positive feedback, response, and a lot of aha moments from our parents.
Okay, this is Mary Kay McDermott, and I just want to talk a little bit about the Baltimore Safe Sleep Campaign video. I don't know, some of you may be familiar with this video. It was developed by the Baltimore Department of Public Health, and we became aware of it through the National Public Radio Report on Safe Sleep Practices. It's a 7-minute presentation, and it focuses on 3 young parents who lost a child due to the infant being placed in an unsafe sleep situation. It's a very poignant video and extremely informative. And what we do in our training is we provide a copy of this video for all of our youth who attend, and we encourage them to show it to anyone who cares for their child. And the youth who have viewed the video have responded to it extremely well. Next. Oh, and it can, as you see, it can be the link, and it can be accessed via the link that's there on the screen.
The second set of scenarios in our risk reduction materials have the same focus as the sleep reduction scenarios. And what we're really trying to do with these is, number one, to raise our young people's consciousness about selecting appropriate caregivers, keeping in mind that, for example, does the person want to care for your child? If the person is angry at you, will they take it out on your child? Has this person ever taken care of a child that's your age? Or, for example, would they be better taking care of a 12-year-old as opposed to a 2-month-old? And the situation is basically the same. And just I think the one scenario that we're going to that you have an opportunity to see has to do with Susan. And it's just kind of the case that a lot of young people can identify with. Next slide, please. Susan Susan is 17 years old. She has a 3-year-old. She hasn't had a boyfriend for a long time. She meets a young man named Logan, and Logan doesn't particularly want to spend a lot of time with her child. And she has a girlfriend, and her girlfriend says, oh, Logan used to see a girlfriend of mine, and the girlfriend told me that Logan was violent. She had to break up with Logan. And subsequently, Susan thinks that her girlfriend must be jealous, so that was kind of her rationale. And so one day, she and her son decide to go to Logan's house to get to Logan's house, and there isn't anything at the house for Logan to eat. She asked Logan to prepare her son for bed, and she was going to go out and get something to eat for her son. While she's gone, he tries to get Logan ready for bed. Logan tries to get her son ready for bed. At that point, he refuses to go to bed. The boyfriend spanks him. He continues to cry, and he subsequently punches the child in the stomach. And when she comes home, her son tells her that he had been punched in the stomach, and she really doesn't want to believe that he would hurt the child, and she ends up putting him to bed. The child gets up later in the night, is complaining of severe stomach pain, and she is really too afraid. She knows she needs to take him to the doctor, but she's too afraid to take him to the doctor because she's afraid that if she does that, then it may jeopardize her relationship with her boyfriend. She puts the child back in bed. Subsequently, she gets up a little later in the day, and she finds that her son is pale. She takes him to the hospital, but at that juncture, it's a little bit too late, and her son actually dies. The prompting questions that we have, in this case is, while Susan did not have a reason to believe that her son, was unsafe with Logan, what are some of the attitudes that might have suggested that he might not be the safest person to care for her child? And we also say, ask yourself, if I have concerns, is the person willing to listen, or does he ignore you? Or does he kind of demonstrate the kind of behavior that would suggest that he might not be the best person to care for your child? You might also have impromptu questions. What are some situations that might really suggest that this person is the right person to care for your child? Next slide, please.
And in addition, at the beginning of the training, our fathers, well, first off, our fathers, often have not been around a father, and they often feel vulnerable and unsure about their ability to parent a baby. And so we are using these real-time baby simulators, which are actual dolls that are linked to a computer. And the intention of using these dolls is to provide the young fathers with an opportunity to become a little familiar with the challenges of caring for a baby before they actually become a father. So during the training, throughout the training, the babies will, they're connected to computers, and so they can fuss a little, and the fathers are encouraged to work with the babies to try to figure out what this baby needs, and the babies are programmed to need to be held and comforted, fed, and changed. And then the fathers take the babies home with them for a 24-hour period of time, and then about a week later we have a follow-up session to get feedback from the fathers and to also let them know what the computers recorded to kind of reinforce what they did well, and also to identify areas where they may need support in the future. This is a brief description of our training. If you would like a copy of the curriculum, we would be happy to send it to you, and our information, I think, is on the next page. Oh, any questions? I'm sorry.
Okay, great. And I think you just answered one of the questions. One of the questions was, do you have any material that attendees could distribute to their clients?
Yes, we have the curriculum, and we'd be happy to send it to you.
Excellent. And the next question is, do all teen fathers and mothers involved with the department statewide receive this type of risk reduction training?
We're just rolling this out, so we began 8 months ago, about 7 or 8 months ago. Yeah, and we hope by the end of 12 months, everybody we trained up, and we've trained the trainers so that they can work with all the teen moms and dads.
Okay, thank you. And we've had so many excellent questions, so if you ask one that hasn't been answered, I'll be sending those to the presenters and I'll send you their response.
Okay, this is the portion of the webinar where we are going to go ahead and turn this over to Scott with the ABA, who will be talking with us in regards to legal issues. Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, thank you for having me. Several colleagues of mine at the ABA have been working on this subject for some time, so it's really nice for us to be able to put something together on it. First of all, let me lay out some broad legal outlines, and then I'll back up to do a little more framing of the issue. Next slide, please. To start, teen parents in foster care have the same basic rights that adults have concerning their children. The statutory provisions that describe the grounds for removal and termination don't address the age of parents. That seems like, to me, probably stating the obvious, but there are some areas where minors' rights are curtailed, for example, in contracts. So I did review the grounds, which the citation there is to where they're collected neatly at the Child Welfare Information Gateway site, which is a very helpful site for all things child welfare if you're not familiar with it. And cases cite to Santosky and Stanley v. Illinois, which are cases that involved and established constitutional rights for parents. And that's some examples there in that citation. And in at least one place, parents have been found to have the same right to attorney. So legislative-wise, the federal statute and regulations indicate that if a child's born to a teen parent in care, you can increase the foster care payments without the child being taken into custody. And that seems to be an area of confusion in conversations I've had. Note that this language is a must include support. It's not a discretionary, it's a must, not a may. Next. So when you consider the constitutional rights to parents that teen parents are assumed to have the same as adults, along with this regulation and statute that backs it up, I think that you have a clear default position that when a teen in care is a parent, they should retain physical and legal custody of their child, of course, unless there is abuse or neglect. But in the review that I'm going to talk about in a second, and also a lot of anecdotes we've heard through the years, it seems that the practice falls below these legal standards. I said I would introduce it a little more, and so like I said, we've been hearing this for a long time, that chiefly that teen parents' children are taken away without legitimate or the same types of grounds. And when I started talking to the NRC for in-home services about this, I tried to find some detailed social science research on this, but I couldn't find any. Although I do imagine there's good data in some states, I don't think that it's been public. So we did a broad search for any cases involving teen parents in foster care, that's court cases. And in the end, we only found 30 cases across the country, but I've read them all, and they do corroborate that there's some cause for concern about how, as a system, how all of us, all the stakeholders, child welfare courts, and service providers are treating these youth and their children. First, cases in point, there are at least 2 class actions that address this, and the one in Illinois principally addresses this, and at this point there's quite a lot at the agency level in Illinois to try to do right by teen parents in those cases. There are some appellate opinions I've found that just flat out said the only reason this child is in care is because their parent was a teenager that was also in care. You have the citations there. So let me break this down a little further. So what do these cases look like at removal? One of the things I work on at the ABA is our publication, Child Law Practice. And for that, I have read and summarized 10 or more child welfare cases a month for several years. One thing that you almost always see, no matter what stage you're at, removal or TPR, in these cases is that the courts explain why the child came into care. It's usually relevant, but I would say that you often see an explanation of the facts as to removal, substance abuse, physical, sexual abuse, even when it's not really relevant to what's being appealed. Now, if you look at teen parent cases, though, we were looking for the grounds for removal and the grounds for TPR. And what is really strange about the removal is that they are simply not there for teen parents. That's what I mean by conspicuously absent, is oftentimes they do not say why the child came in there. The child was born, the parent was in care, the child was removed at birth. Another thing I was looking at in reviewing them, so there's some examples there regarding removal. Now, I was also looking at, after removal, did the children seem to be kept in care longer because they were born to a teen parent that was in care? And I really didn't see that, not as a trend, but I did look for that. So next slide. I'm not going to read through those because we're short on time. Now, the next place you really see a difference is that in termination, some courts have held that really the teen parents should be given extra services or considerations where the parent is in foster care. Now, that seems to conflict a little bit with my first statement that they have the same basic rights. But I think another way to look at this, which is sort of the way I'd present it, is that this is not a different legal standard than for an adult. The state has a responsibility to provide reasonable efforts, including assessing the individual needs of the parent, including a teen parent. So they must provide services, and if they're for learning things that a new parent needs to learn, that's no different legally than substance abuse or housing that you would have for any parent that's involved in the child welfare system. So some examples there are a teen parent that they said at termination it couldn't be held against them that they didn't provide financial support because this child or the teen's case plan said that they had to attend school full time. In another case, which is in JGB, they couldn't have abandonment because the child was physically in the custody of this parent in foster care for a lot of the time. It was a 12-month constructive abandonment ground. Though the child wasn't legally, the child was legally and removed, she was placed with her mother. So next, states, of course, again, have an obligation to provide reasonable efforts to prevent removal, and I would characterize these cases as being prevention. These are in-home cases if the child, like I think the default legal position is in the parent's legal and physical custody unless you've had abuse. So I would argue that they have the right to the same in-home and preventative services that you would get anywhere. I put another little citation about homelessness because some of these cases, although not really, they didn't call it that, but in my assessment, I think they treated the teen parents as if they're homeless. I don't really think that's fair. I think it's more akin to them receiving housing assistance. And there's some reference to poverty versus neglect in the article cited there. So another area I think that I really wish could be explored more with research that's better designed for this is to look at how our own biases affect this. And I think, you have personal ones that we feel like we would want our children to, go to a 4-year college and all this, and oh, this is unwanted pregnancies interrupting that. But I think we all know that objectively, we're here to guide youth, to give them advice, and not to direct them, not to tell them what to do. But it's really harder than it sounds, and it's hard not to impose your own values. I think the systemic biases might even be more important here because, of course, the teen parents are surrounded by mandatory reporters, and little things that might never be called into CPS can be really scrutinized in depth in these cases. There are a couple cases that talk about conflicts of interest. I don't feel like I really have time to go into a lot of detail about that, but this webinar or this PowerPoint will be up on the In-Home Services website, and you can look those up if you think that's an issue in your area. Of course, this is very broad, and this is going to really differ depending on what role you're in, whether you're a service provider, caseworker, an attorney. But you heard about some services geared toward teen parents earlier, and I think those are some of the types of preventative services that I think are more appropriate than some of the removals that you see when you're looking at the court cases. Although, if there is abuse and neglect, of course, these aren't mutually exclusive. So California and Illinois have thought a lot about this and have put this in policy and legislation. And I didn't do an extensive search for that. I did do some, but not as extensive as the case law research. But I couldn't find a lot in other states. But that's one of the reasons we have that California case cited there, and some of this additional reading is because these can show you what some of the other conclusions that they came to policy-wise about how these cases should be. California in particular can have a plan for the infant child without taking them into care, and I think it better respects the legal right of the teen parent to control their child and their destiny, while still giving the child welfare agency an ability to try to provide the services and in an organized way. So in conclusion, I think that although this isn't a particularly scientific research, this case review does suggest that there are a lot of players in the child welfare system that could and should perhaps work on improving how we handle these cases. And I really hope that, more important than the what can you do slides I have here is that you think about in your role and in your jurisdiction, how are you handling this? And are you meeting the law? And are you really respecting the youth and their new role as parents and all those responsibilities and rights that are inherent there? So my contact information should be on the next slide. I'm happy to answer questions that James collects, or you can send them to me directly, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks very much. And that big pause at the beginning was me trying to introduce Scott while I had the mute button on, so I apologize for that. Where are we? It's 2 o'clock. I want to, James, can we stay on for some more questions, or are we going to have to close out?
Yes, we sure can.
Okay. Are there additional questions? But actually, before we do questions, I want to just note for people who will be signing off now that there is an annotated bibliography on the NRC for In-Home Services website, and it has a lot of information, including policy and statute and guides for advocacy, comprehensive services. Please do check that out. We're actually adding the California policy on shared parental responsibility in the next day. So.
Okay, and do you want to go ahead and do the questions that we have additionally now?
TC, why don't you make the pitch for us helping before we take, and then we'll stay on for questions.
Thanks, Lisa. Just real quickly, I'll go over the resource centers, which includes the National Resource Center for In-Home Services, Runaway and Homeless Youth Training and TA Center, Friends, National Child Welfare Resource Center on Legal and Judicial Issues. All the folks that are hosting this webinar today have the ability to provide training and TA to both state and tribal systems, working to improve services to pregnant parenting teens, as well as peer-to-peer connections or peer-to-peer learning, so we can connect you with a similar program in a similar size state or similar size agency. We, of course, have training and curricula and trainers. We also come out and do on-site T&TA for our prospective audiences. Again, that's based on our funding streams as well. And then information and resources and referrals, we'll provide those to you. You can check out any of our websites. And again, just a reminder, the webinar is going to be posted at both the NRC in-home website that you see there, as well as RITAC's website. So you'll be able to get the webinar as well as a transcript from today. So you will have access to that PowerPoint. And then one final pitch before we go away is to try to get some questions and or comments about the webinar today, as well as we plan to work with Kaplan, the Community Action Partnership of Western Nebraska, and 2 of their young fathers that are currently accessing services to talk with those young fathers. They have both agreed to work with us to conduct a recorded webinar around their work schedules, and they're interested in whatever questions you may have for them directly, and we will work with them to get those answered for you, and we'll post that webinar along with this one and any other resources we have at a later date. So if you have questions that you would like to ask specifically to young fathers, we will work with 2 young men that are over in Vicky's program and get those answered for you. So at this time, if there are any other questions, James, that have come through.
Yes, the first question is for Scott. Scott, how would you recommend if they have a client, a teen father with a criminal record, how would you suggest them going about expunging records?
Well, I have expunged records or helped expunge records before, but I don't know how that works state to state. I say only that in Tennessee, one of the elements of that was that the judge would hear, why it shouldn't be on the public record anymore and how the person has redeemed himself. And so I would guess that other states, that Tennessee's not alone in that, and that if the teen father is doing what they can to provide for their child, getting that information and presenting that to the court might be helpful. But yeah, there's probably a more complete answer if somebody wants to email me, and I might be able to look into that further.
Okay, excellent. Okay, at this time I'm going to turn the webinar back over to Cynthia, and if there were your question wasn't answered, we will be posting a Q&A document of those, or I will be emailing you directly the answer to those questions.
Okay. On behalf of the National Resource Center for In-Home Services, we want to thank you for joining today's webinar, and we also want to thank you for staying on for the additional 5 minutes that we went over. If you have additional questions, the contact information for each presenter and our partners are listed for your convenience. Immediately following today's webinar, we will send out a short online survey and hope that you will take a moment to provide us your feedback. We hope that you learned something new today, and this concludes this webinar in the series on pregnant and parenting teens. We want to thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.